This is the left-hand side of the Paioli conventional front suspension, used only in the 1994 and early 1995 model year on the GasGas Trial bikes. This left-hand side has the front disc brake caliper mount. The internal rod here has a little top-out spring. Then this spring sits on top. Then there's the top cap. There's a special tool that needs to be produced to remove this piece on the left-hand side. This cone goes in here on the end of the fork leg. This goes in here, and the cone sits over this like that. Then this bolt and washer goes through the bottom here, which is typical, and screws in to this piece. The problem is that when you try to loosen this, even sometimes with a impact, this piece rotates. So to hold this piece so it doesn't rotate, I've modified a socket. And what I did was I took a size 3/4 USA, or you can use a 19mm metric, and I've cut away two sides of the socket, and I make a tool that sits over this. And then I can slide down into the fork leg and extension and hold this with a breaker bar or a ratchet while I use an impact to remove this bolt on the other end. Now, something else about these Paiolis, they have this is the clamp for the fork brace or the front fender support. This cap here doesn't remove like on the 95 through 1999 types. It snaps up into place, and there's a washer that goes in first, followed by the seal, then a circlip on top of the seal, then the dust shield. Well, how do you remove the seal? Well, you have to drive, after you remove the dust cover and this circlip, you drive this down, and by doing that, it pushes the seal up. This is actually a surface that the seal sits on, the washer and the seal, like that. Well, then when you put it back together, you pull it and it snaps. How do you hold this in position? Well, what you do is you move this fender support ring up to where it's under this. Then you put a bolt in it and tighten it up lightly. That holds this from going down when you're driving in your new seal, which you can use your old seal or a seal driver to put it in. This one, it's PVC pipe with a machined aluminum ring, kind of fancy for a backyard mechanic. But what it does is it goes over the top of the chrome leg, which is in this, and it knocks down this piece like this, and that drives the seal up. So then I have the seal driver, which is a piece of PVC that's just turned down a little bit, and it pushes the seal in. I want to mention that sometimes these get broken, these from over tightening typically, or from a big crash. These are sometimes available, this fender support brace. It sits in a little locating groove. I think you'll see that this is similar to the front suspension used on some of the other brands, but there's a locating groove here that this sits in. And if this is broken, the only way to change it is to take it off this end. The problem is this is threaded on, and when it was made, they used Loctite, a thread sealant. It's virtually impossible to take this off. I know you can heat it, but there's usually corrosion on these threads, and you usually will ruin these parts. These bikes are getting pretty old for spare parts availability, so please don't ever try to take this apart. So you use a split clamp. They were made in the aftermarket. Several people made these. These were made in the USA, really quite nice. They sold them as a set of two. Also, I can recall finding them just singular sold. This obviously just goes on the fork like two pieces and solves all your problems. So to get off your cracked one or whatever, you'll just pry it apart and break it away. If it's partially broken already, it's trash, so that's what you do. And we will discuss the right hand side leg in the next segment of this video. The right hand side is pretty simple. There is no spring. The spring is only on the left side on this design. You'll have your bolt in the bottom, which will separate the internal dampener assembly. When you unscrew your top cap, you'll have a jam nut here, and when you release this jam nut, you can screw this cap from the dampener rod, and then you can extract it, and it has a long needle. Be certain that the needle is tightened correctly in here. Sometimes this needle can come loose, and it may be found down inside the tube. What this needle does is when you turn this knob, it moves the needle down and closes a valve a little bit down inside there and alters the dampening. You have the dampener tube assembly, and oil tends to stay inside this, so it'll take some time for you to wash this out, but it's important that you get this clean, because if there's sludge laying in this, it will contaminate your new oil when you're changing your seals. The actual changing of the seal procedure is the same as shown previously. So what I do is I put this in a solvent, this end down in a solvent, and I pump this, and that pumps the solvent up in there and washes this out. Be aware that oil will squirt out of this top hole here when you're doing this. This is a messy job, and then you will want this to thoroughly dry. This does come apart. There's a threaded joint right here where you can see the darker aluminum. Again, I don't really think it's a good idea to try and take this apart, because it can be seized, because these are fairly old at this point in time. It's just best to try and wash this out. If you have some broken components internally, well then of course you would want to take this apart. If you do, you're going to want to heat this with a heat gun. At any rate, that's the story on the conventional Paioli fork. Thank you for watching.